Welcome, everyone, to our next track, Sports Tech Investing. This session is called Against the Odds, PointsBet and NBC Sports. It's powered by Comcast SportsTech. And I'm thrilled to introduce Will McIntosh, the Executive Vice President of Digital and Sports Consumer Business for the NBC Sports Group, and Nicolina O'Rourke, the Chief Financial Officer for NBC Sports Regional Networks and the Senior Vice President at NBC Sports Enterprises. Welcome to our virtual stage. Greetings. Thank you very much for joining us, and excited to dig in here. We'll start with you, Nicolina. Obviously, this is a fairly recent and fairly major step for NBC Sports. Its recent partnership with PointsBet. Taking back to the start of the process of ending up there, why sports betting? What was the landscape like that it made sense for NBC Sports to get involved?
Well, sports betting, as I'm sure everyone here has realized, is a growing space that since the repeal of PASPA in 2018, we, like many of our media counterparts, have been looking at the space for a couple of reasons. When viewers have skin in the game, and in this case, money in the game, they tend to be a bit more engaged. People tend to watch more games, and they tend to watch those games for a longer period of time. And so from a pure sort of fan engagement perspective, this is a great space for us as sports rights and sports production people. In addition to that, the ad sales category, anytime a new category opens up, it's good news for us, right? We hold great assets from a sales perspective, and having more bidders in the market for that supply is always beneficial. When this is very similar to the, I'll call it the DFS brand awareness arms race back in 2015 and 16, where DraftKings and FanDuel, and you can see the benefits that they have today, where they built up their brand under the DFS umbrella. And we saw, rates in the DFS category sort of skyrocket. 2 players, not a lot of supply. Now we have more players, more sports betting operators entering the space, which means that our ad units get valued at a premium. So multiple reasons why the sports betting space is interesting to us just on a baseline perspective, but then add on top of that the operator valuations that you're looking at. Making it more interesting is potentially getting into the operator space in the long term. When you look at what DraftKings is valuated at today at about $20 billion, you've got Rush Street going public, and you've got PointsBet basically doubling their market cap since our deal's announcement. So a lot of benefits here in getting into the space, just based on our traditional business, as well as sort of the future growth opportunity that comes with sports betting. Yeah,
I remember the fall of 2015 when legalization of daily fantasy was such a hot topic, and it was covered some of the protests. They were the most organized, polite protesters I have ever come across. And it was sort of remarkable. And I imagine the demographics, I think I've seen from some of the research data that a lot of the sports bettors tend to be, better educated, higher income as well. I assume that's part of what helps make it an advantageous for the ad sales category.
As well as younger.
Younger too.
And be younger as well.
Mm-hmm. And so as far as PointsBet specifically, following the process, meeting with all the different vendors, why did they come out on top?
There are a lot of established players in the category, and we really didn't go into the marketplace with any predetermined partner. We took all of our assets across NBC Universal and Comcast and started an RFP process back in January, where we met with about a dozen sportsbook operators to just sort of talk about what a partnership might look like. A long-term partnership requires a lot of support on both sides. It's not just about the commercial terms and the economics, but it's also about the teams that both businesses are willing to invest in, to put into place, to actually enact it. When you look at the Stars Group's deal that happened in the UK for Sky Bet, that really worked best because they cut a deal and put it in a drawer and never looked at it again, right? They really operated a partnership where they grew together, evolved the space together, and were able to and create a lot more value because it was a true partnership. And so when we entered the space, we really looked and kept an eye towards that partnership. We could have gone with a more established business, obviously bigger, already a mature player in the marketplace. But we think that the growth opportunity that comes with an insurgent that is PointsBet could potentially be much greater. Number one, they're obviously growing. They're pretty young. They've only been around since 2015, hit the Australian Stock Exchange in 2019, and immediately started focusing on growing the US space because of the individual states opening up one by one, right? The other reason we liked PointsBet is they own their tech stack. They, if you talk to them, they will tell you they are a tech-forward company. Right? Their focus is on their product, their consumer experience. Not only is it sort of the consumer interface and the actual product itself, but it's also the bet products. They have unique bet products that others aren't necessarily offering yet. They have points betting, which is obviously the namesake of the business. And there's also a name your bet tool, which we love. You know, it's great for editorial storytelling. If one of our editors comes up with an interesting trend that they want to create a line on, we call the trading desk. We collaborate on an idea, and that can go to market, right? So it's a very interesting setup where you can create these prop lines as you go. And when you think about the longer term sports betting capabilities, is that ability to sort of identify fun bets in the place to sort of make watching a game or watching a match more interesting. And so PointsBet has that capability, which we like because we really see down the road here convergence between gaming and viewership.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I was moderating a panel yesterday, and Layla Mintis pointed out that when you talk about creating new lines, you can't bet on federal elections, but you can bet on hot dog eating contests. I mean, it's just the regulations will evolve over time, I'm sure. So when you start looking, you know, on the product and tech side, and you're getting your hands on this new toy that is PointsBet and working to integrate it with what NBC has, you know, where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for us, I think a lot of people are unaware. We have invested in and grown a number of what I would say are more digital and commerce-like businesses. So we have, obviously, we have an expertise in kind of the sports media side of the space, but we've also built large e-commerce platforms. Golf Now is a great example of that, which is going to be part of the PointsBet's partnership. So while PointsBet is different, we've already been investing in the product and tech ecosystem, preparing for this partnership. We've significantly changed and invested in our Roto World property, which is still one of the largest and most visited, mostly fantasy sports focused properties, at least until recently. But we've doubled down on our investment in product and tech around daily fantasy and betting in particular. And obviously, we've had a very successful free-to-play app in NBC Sports Predictor, and that lends itself very well to the PointsBet partnership. So we'll integrate them there. But if you think about the future of this partnership and in the future of sports betting, I think we all know that enabling interactivity around things like fantasy sport, daily fantasy, free-to-play games, and now sports betting increases engagement for our audience. It gets them to consume more of our content, stay longer, and have I would just say a more fulfilling experience as a sports fan. And so, you know, where you quickly go in your mind is how quickly can I get to allowing people to bet during a game? And the first versions of that might be second screen experience, you know, where you're using a mobile app as you're watching on television. You know, but ultimately what we'd love to get to is a scenario where you have interactivity with the broadcast experience. You can envision a world where you're watching the game unfold, whatever that game might be, and you can place a bet based on what's happening at that time. You know, there's a lot of legal and technological challenges to figure out before you get there. But, you know, if you look at, for example, what we've been doing with our league partners over the last number of years, we've always had to be in a place where we could geo-restrict content for rights holders who honor rights holders in other territories. You know, so I think the earliest versions of this will be on a geo-restricted basis, but we're already talking to a lot of different and interesting technology companies that are going to help us solve some of the challenges to get to that experience that we all want as sports fans.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned golf, so clearly everyone here wants to know what your handicapping of the U.S. Open is now. If you have any good insights for us all.
Well, there were a lot of writers last night writing about how easy Wingfoot was playing, and like normal, the USGA has brought everybody back to reality this morning. So it looks like the war of attrition has started, but it's a great leaderboard. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We're just happy that it's back with NBC and Golf Channel after all this time. So I'm sure it'll be great.
Mm-hmm. You started hinting at the interactivity of placing a bet. Just how deep will that partnership and integration get? I mean, I know I've talked in the past, actually, Zach Leonsis, one of our co-hosts of this wonderful event. I remember having a conversation with him a few years ago, and he was, wide-eyed talking about the idea of maybe having, a separate OTT feed that's the betting centric one. And I know NBC has done separate broadcasts for, like the NHL All-Star game, where there's a very, data, the analytic heavy one. And so it's not too much of a leap to then say, hey, let's have a betting one. I mean, how far will this integration go?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that from a product standpoint, and then I'll throw it back to Nicolina from a programming perspective. We're talking about things just like that. Like, do you create alternative and or complementary feeds of our live sports events that are more betting focused or oriented in nature? I think you'll see us do that both regionally and nationally over in the near term, over the next 3 to 6 months. We're talking with a lot of our league partners and team partners about that right now. We've done some experimentation, but Nicolina, do you want to talk about, what people can expect with respect to integration in our programming?
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you happen to live in Chicago or near Philadelphia and can watch the NBC Sports Chicago or Philadelphia feeds now, you'll see PointsBet integrated into our pregame shows. So we have pregame call to actions, a storyline segment that talks about interesting trends. One of the best things about sports betting is if you're interested in good storytelling, a lot of the same trends that you bet on are the same ones that make for great stories. And so you'll see these segments start to pop up in the markets where PointsBet is active, and it'll be integrated into our programming. That's sort of the holy grail if you are an operator, right? Being directly integrated in the programming. And over time, I think you're going to see that more and more into the game itself. Our goal here is, as we, this is more Will's space, but as latency starts to come down, you're going to see a lot more of the in-game commentary. And I think you're going to see a lot more of the sidecast and the betcasts coming alive to a greater extent. Right now, it's sort of fun. It's really personality driven. We have done a predict a game with the Washington football team last year in the preseason. We have done altcasts with sort of bet-focused commentators, both for Sixers games as well as for Wizards games. And those have all been on our Plus channels. And it's sort of, it's a fun alternative broadcast, but it's still not the main cast. And what you're going to see over time is it becomes more of the integrated storyline of the main cast as we sort of layer on that gaming layer so that you can hear the commentary, and also take action. The other thing we're doing is also expanding the predictor game that Will mentioned, where in the markets where you can take action, you can convert directly into a bet slip with PointsBet. You can immediately get pricing related to placing a bet. So there's a lot of integration and touch points that we're going to be exploring here in our new partnership.
You sort of hinted at it already about the jurisdictions where it's allowed. How challenging has it been to to navigate the various state by state regulations, and how much would both from both the business and a product side, I'm sure that carries quite a bit of a challenge.
We definitely have learned a lot. Every jurisdiction is different. Not only does sports betting need to be legal, the state actually has to stand up the infrastructure to approve the operators to actually operate. So even though Illinois has been legal for a little while now, it took months and months between changes in legislation, in-person registration, not in-person registration for mobile betting, whether or not mobile betting, how many skins for mobile betting. There's a lot of nuances, exactly to your point. On the ad standard side, there's a whole nother set of standards that we're dealing with. And so I'll say it's a growth space. And so I think what you're going to find is companies are willing to invest in the standards layers that are required to evolve this, and also evolve it with the legislators. A lot of the regulations around it seem to be based in historical license requirements. And as this thing moves forward and as states are looking for ways to fund their treasury, I think we'll start to see this space change. So all we know is that it evolves, and all we know is that we have to keep pace in order to actually optimize our values.
Saying historical framework is a rather charitable description.
I think the other thing you have to remember here is we really, as a media partner to our league partners, we can't just do this on our own. You know, we have to really do this in conjunction with the league partners. And if you use the PGA Tour as an example, they took a very thoughtful approach to the space where they considered their media partners as they went out and constructed, I think, what today is these 4 official gaming operator deals that they have. Fortunately for us, one of those is PointsBet, but you know, that's part of it. It's not just technological and legal, it's also doing it in conjunction with the league partners based on the deals that we have in place.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you mentioned PointsBet. I mean, maybe let's dive a little bit deeper into the choice of PointsBet. It's certainly the tech stack is very advantageous. The name recognition isn't quite the same as some of the incumbents here. I mean, what were some of the pros and cons of choosing a smaller betting partner like PointsBet over one of the others?
Again, I think, you know, it's funny. I think the tech stack piece can't be overstated. The ability to move quickly as we talk about, you know, everything that we've talked about in terms of integration. It's easy for us to add a commentator who can tell stories, right? But it's not an integrated experience. And for viewers and fan engagement to really track all the way through any single match or game, getting into that in-game capability of continuing to interact with putting, you know, money against the game or playing against your friends, you know, all of that is about being able to sync up that experience with the actual viewing. And we're still a little ways away from that. The tech stack piece is important because that seamless experience of going to PointsBet and seeing, if you were to go to PointsBet today, you'll see NBC Sports integrated as the official media partner within their app. And that singular experience flows seamlessly through any state that you're in, right? Which is going to be important. A lot of the tech stack that the operators are dealing with is on a, you know, server by state basis, which, and some of the other operators are also using different apps by state, right? And so I think as we talk about then layering on more experiences, it's going to get heavy. That infrastructure gets heavy and it's less flexible, right? And so it definitely, it was a differentiator. The other is growth comes with new businesses, right? If you're an established player, probably a little less room for growth in a partnership than a new player. And that was definitely attractive as well. When we ultimately opted to take equity, going with someone who had a good growth profile made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the one. I mean, the nice thing for if you're in PointsBet shoes in this partnership is we become their #1 source of customer acquisition. You know, I mean, we can quickly take them from the upstart to more of a household name, and that's why the marriage is going to work really well.
Mm-hmm. It was actually at a SportTech event last year. I was moderating a panel with Seth Young of PointsBet, and on stage he broke some news. It was the start of their new in-play baseball product at the moment, and I bring that up just because I know that's something PointsBet has been aggressive with, and certainly the trends for all sports betting tends to move that way. So, Will, how big do you think live or in-play, whatever you want to call it, will be part of the product going forward?
It's going to take us time to get there. Like I said, I think the first version of that is you're watching probably what is a broadcast experience on a television or a big screen, because that's your nearest to real-time experience, and you're placing bets on a mobile device as you're watching that experience. I think where we all want to get to is how can I lay that interactivity over the actual event as I'm consuming it on my mobile device or on a laptop or on a connected TV device. And I think the big, you know, aside from all the legal and kind of territorial challenges, the biggest issue there is latency. You know, a lot of people don't realize that if you're watching a digital stream of a sports event, you know, there could be upwards of like a minute delay versus what you would see if you were watching that same event in the same room on a traditional kind of, you know, delivered in a traditional cable or satellite television format. But there are a lot of companies investing in getting to near real time or real time, you know, streaming and addressing the latency issue. That and the legal kind of, when is it legal and brought, and I would say legal in enough states so where you can kind of think about tech stack from a national perspective are kind of the two things that have to be unlocked. But like I said before, I do think we'll be doing in-play betting experimentation, at least on a localized level, sooner rather than later. I would think in the next 6 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm. And so 6 to 12 months, and where will, those in this audience are probably interested. But what app are they going to be looking for? Will it be PointsBet? Will it be NBC? Or will it be so well integrated you could use either to have that point of contact and sale?
I think, again, that comes back in some respects to the legalities of what we can do and how we can integrate PointsBet as a sports book into all of our content. But at a minimum, it would be an experience where you saw sports content happening and then you're seeing some type of integration with PointsBet as our partner, where you can more easily facilitate a bet based on what's happening in the game. I think obviously the more integrated experience is better for the consumer, but there's a few different things we've got to figure out there before we can actually execute in that way.
Mm-hmm. And Nicolina, I know it hasn't been that long since you signed off on it, but have you had time to reflect on just how monumental this deal is for NBC? That it's a major embrace of an industry that obviously is still in its infancy as far as legality in this country goes.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think as we were when we were cutting the deal, it felt, to your point, it felt a little bit like, we cut a lot of deals. We do a lot of rights deals. We do a lot. But, entering this space has always been on our roadmap, right? It's a growth space. It's a space where we can own a relationship directly with our consumer. Media, at the heart of media, is a B2B business, right? We sell to advertisers and we sell to distributors, but we're only now getting into this direct-to-consumer space. In these engagements, every time someone places a bet, that's another consumer touch point, right? And that's a new space for us just overall. And so it very nicely sort of fits into the profile of where NBC Universal is investing today, which is in these direct-to-consumer engagement spaces to create these more enhanced, more targeted experiences. And ultimately, leading to that more customized experience. So sports betting, again, I think it's probably been published a couple of times, but David Preschlack is known for saying it's the glass of wine that makes dinner taste better. It's another way to create more experiential fun for our customer that, from a B2B perspective, we never had before in traditional television. So it's big. And it also is another step towards being more technology forward as a company, as opposed to a straight linear broadcaster.
Mm-hmm. Certainly we're seeing now that the Premier League, which seems like it just ended its season, is now starting another one. And certainly that has brought Peacock for a lot of sports fans. It's getting a lot more attention. Just sort of occurs to me now that seems to be a blank canvas when you have all these direct-to-consumer, that sort of streaming platform. Does that provide extra avenues for, this sort of integration?
Absolutely. Peacock is a part of this deal. As sports programming migrates and proliferates on the direct-to-consumer platform, you will see our sports book partners entering that space as well. The ad sales space is a little less traditional, obviously, but it's even more targeted. And because sports betting is being legalized on a state-by-state basis, that targeting capability, that ability to really hone in on a call to action that will actually convert, is going to be very important. And so a platform like Peacock is beneficial both from a technology play perspective in the longer term, but also from that geo-targeting today as our audience grows.
Yeah, that geo-targeting is amazing. You pop out of the Lincoln Tunnel and all of a sudden all of your social media ads are sports betting, or at least based on my browser history. I guess that speaks to who I am. Mm-hmm. So again, it's only been a little over 2 years since PASPA was overturned, but let's look 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. What is the future of sports betting? How profound of a role will it be in sports? And I know there's been some blowback in parts of Europe where maybe it's become too all-consuming. How do you find that right balance and go from there?
It's definitely, we watch what happened in the UK. It also happened in Australia. where consumers are sort of inundated and flooded, right, with too many calls to action, too much advertising, too much. And, if we're not careful, we run the same risk in the markets where everyone's live, because it is an arms race for brand awareness, right? This is a volume play for a sports book operator. And so getting that name out there so that people will come to you is the number one path to market share for them. And it is something that we spend a lot of time talking about, in terms of frequency. We're self-regulated in terms of how much we put into the market, separation in terms of number of 30 seconds, 15 seconds you're going to see on these ads, and so it continues to limit the supply. And the leagues are also aware. They're also worried about it. In order for this thing to really blossom, we really have to be self-regulated in how much we sell. And it's hard in this environment. Everyone's scrambling. If you're traditional media right now, you'll take any dollar, right? You'll take any dollar that's going to come to you, because we're all repositioning our mature businesses. And so the more blood you can take from that stone right now, we'll take it. And it takes a lot of discipline to say, no, we can only have a couple of units in every hour that is dedicated to this. We can only integrate to a certain level. We're still a news organization. We're sports lifestyle brands, but we're also just a news organization. And so we have to find that balance so that it doesn't come under scrutiny, and then we don't hit that wall that other countries have.
Mm-hmm. Will, do you have any thoughts?
No, I think she summed it up well. I mean, when you think about what she said, it's like blending, a somewhat conservative viewpoint with all of the really exciting things that you'd love to do from a product and tech perspective, because it's all kind of right there at our fingertips to figure out. But I think, if you look at these other countries where betting and online betting is commonplace and has been going on for years, over some period of time, the stigma associated with betting and gambling, I think, dissipates. And I think as that happens, you'll see more flexibility and more openness to creating all kinds of unique experiences for casual fans in particular.
Mm-hmm. As you have you seen consumer, with the pandemic and obviously no one being able to attend live sports, certainly I assume there's been some changes in viewership. Has the pandemic changed, some of your thoughts and research on consumer behavior and how quickly you might push this product?
I'll sort of leave it to Will on how quickly we might push the product. I think there might be, more to that than just sort of the consumer behavior. But I will say, I think what we've seen in terms of these bubble seasons is this appetite for escapism. In a time when it's an election year and obviously all eyes focused on the election and COVID, I think that sports, without sort of other new programming really, because the fall production, of long form episodics have sort of also taken a hit. I think with sports, we've seen a lot of viewership come back. People are excited. There's a lot of action being taken because people are excited to spend time. It's another way. Social betting is another way to spend time with your friends, right? There are ways that it sort of increases interactivity without in-person interaction. And so I think, if anything, there's been pent-up demand over the course of the last 6 months, and we're seeing some of that now. Will that continue once we sort of pass this COVID phase, whenever that ends? That we're not sure of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, we're not in the best position, I would say, to look at how the pandemic has, better enabled sports betting. But if you look at the data that's out there, and there is some data that's been published for some of the states where betting has been legalized, it's clear that sports fans are gravitating towards betting. And you really saw that when some of these, I would just say, kind of secondary and tertiary sports just started coming back to play. You saw these kind of crazy, volume of betting happening on sports that you wouldn't have otherwise expected. So it's, I think it's here to stay. And I think obviously we want to see people get back to a world where they can go to venues and experience sports. But, even under those scenarios, betting, mobile betting, online betting is going to be a huge part of the experience moving forward.
Be careful, Will. When I wrote a college newspaper column ranking sports, primary, secondary, tertiary, and so on, never gotten so much hate mail in my life. So
you notice I didn't reference any specific sports there.
We all know you were talking Russian table tennis. They're coming to find you right now.
That's right.
All right. Actually, it looks like it's right about. That's an odd note to end on, but we are unfortunately out of time here. Any final thoughts? Anything else that our audience should be mindful of looking forward in the sports betting space and what's to come with NBC? All right. I think we're great. Thank you very much. A virtual round of applause to our esteemed panelists, Will and Nicolina, and they hopefully will be able to join in the networking area for a few questions after this. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.